Welcome back to Taival Outdoors. My name is Joel. This is Rokka. And we are out on this winter day, or should I say almost winter evening, on a forest road following some ATV trail, I guess. I have Vulk, or Ahkio, behind me. So this is the first trip with that thing. Also first overnight trip with a hot tent and a titanium stove. It's Friday evening, left home after work. We're just going to head out, hopefully find a clearing, a bog or something, and set up shop right there. Shouldn't be too long before we get there. So thanks for joining and enjoy this winter adventure. Whew, we made it. Looks like there's not a lot of snow on the forest floor. Maybe 20 centimeters or so. This is all quite fresh snow up here that has come down when the temperatures have been rather cold, so it's very fluffy snow. The bog starts just over there, and I think I will take skis off and do a little walk around to see what would be the best place to set up a tent. This is actually quite challenging time of the year, or challenging winter conditions, to set up a non-freestanding tent, because there isn't enough snow for a proper snow anchor, which I actually have few longer sticks that I've made especially for that use. I have those with me, but the ground is also frozen, so pounding in stakes is very difficult as well. All I can do is try, see if they go in or not. Now the final thing to do before setting up the inner tent is that I will pile just a bit of snow on the sides, although this tent doesn't have snow skirts. I don't know why. And I do know that sealing the tent like this is not required to keep hot air in, but it's more of a comfort thing to eliminate the breeze. Now, for those of you who are worried about airflow, I do have a carbon monoxide alarm with me, and I will not seal this door. I don't know what you guys actually see right now, but you are roughly in the center back of the inner tent. Doorway is here, center pole, and I actually took my whole duffel bag in here and just threw the rain cover to the bottom side. Now I can have all my gear inside here in this duffel bag. Stove will go next to it. I will of course leave plenty of room between the stove and the duffel bag for obvious reasons. And then firewood stack will be roughly here where I am now. And that should leave this doorway then clear for us both to move around. The inner tent is kind of offset. I did that by accident because I attached this corner to a wrong place, but that doesn't matter. Actually, that makes it even better, because that way I have again more room on this side where the movement is going to happen, and then I have to just fiddle around over here a bit more, but that's fine. I will first do all the sleep system stuff out of the way, so I don't have to try to do that while the stove is here, or I'll definitely not do that while the stove is burning. But before we start that, let's try something out. Woo! I wonder if this holds. Yep. Perfect. So this is of course the main star of this trip. This is Pomoly T1 Mini titanium stove. This is the original carrying sack, and to be exact, this is the fast fold model, because in my opinion, if you're going to use a stove in the winter, you're going to wear some kind of gloves, and that's why fast fold makes the most sense to me. Also, the top and the bottom are reinforced, so it doesn't warp around as much as some other tiny stoves might do. There you can perhaps see what kind of locking mechanism it uses. Very simple, no tools, no fuss. Sometimes it just needs a bit of a tough handling, tough care. And then of course the legs. And that's basically it. And this is the only part which I'm not a big fan of. So there's 3 of these screws. You can imagine that these are quite easy to drop to the snow and you will never see them again. They essentially just hold this dampening mechanism in place. And that's the only part where you have to fiddle around a bit. Not something I would necessarily want to do if it's like minus 30 degrees Celsius, but it's only minus 10 now. Should get around minus 16 last time I checked during the night, but not a problem. And that's the mechanism itself. Very straightforward, spring-loaded. All right, maybe there's now even enough light for the GoPro to see, but we are all here. Bedding is here. I have a bivy bag, but that is just to protect the down sleeping bag from him. I will keep the bivy bag as open as it gets during the night. So as I mentioned, my gear is there, the stove is there, sitting on a couple of pieces of wood. Rest of the wood's there. So time now to process some smaller stuff and get this baby going. A lot of this stuff is frozen solid, so kind of difficult to process. Come on, you can do it. You can do it. Let's close this up. Open the hatch. Whew. I think we got it. Right, the stove is going. Firewood here. And it is drying and getting ready to be used. I thought that I brought a lot of firewood, but now looking at it here, it doesn't look like much. But the plan is that I will process some ready for tomorrow morning, so I can make morning coffee and breakfast and things like that. And then everything else I will burn tonight. And also trying to figure out a way how to make the firewood last as long as possible. But before doing any of that, I need to get something, well, not off of my chest, but from my back. Whew. Because I've been wearing hydration bladder the whole day. This is a style that I use when fat biking during winter, and I wanted to test if it works out during a winter backpacking or skiing trip like this as well, and I can tell you that it has worked indeed. The only downside now is that I will have to keep this in the sleeping bag, so otherwise it will of course freeze during the night. And for those of you who are wondering like why I'm carrying water because there's snow everywhere, well, you cannot drink snow while on the go, and it just makes things more convenient when you're just setting up the camp, want to have maybe a hot cup of something quickly and so forth. Then when you have everything set up, you can start melting snow and doing all that. All right, but let's get this off, because I have just a merino wool t-shirt underneath this Ace Winter Combat shirt, which is an excellent piece of clothing when you're active during winter. But I will now maybe not put wool socks on, but just a thicker, like a medium layer on. And then I think we should start making some dinner. Now, talking about making a hot beverage, maybe I was talking about that, maybe not, I don't know. Some snow, and then just add water. It is absolutely roaring. I figured while I'm boiling water and stuff for the food, I will keep the air intake completely open and the backside is a bit closed. I'm melting some olive oil while I'm boiling the water. So, double combo. Oh, look at that. The chimney is actually picking up some color. That's what the open air intake does. So this was actually going to be my dessert. A bit of hot cocoa, hot chocolate. Chef's cocoa drink powder. I think this is again from some military exercise. Yeah, made by Leader, so I would imagine so. Oh, hot. But definitely the kind of winter camping pick-me-up that I needed. All right, I know what you're thinking. What you are thinking and what he is thinking. Now it's winter time, so it's again the season to switch from beef jerky to pork jerky. 50% fat, 50% protein. Doesn't get better winter survival food than this. But this is not what is for dinner. For dinner we have chicken curry type of a thing. You'll see. So while I'm still waiting for the water to boil, hang on, I quickly whittled something to cook with, and I think it's time for us to start, well, melting and preparing our chicken. I pillaged through our freezer. We actually have 3 different freezers, and one of them is in my gear room, and in it was this old bag of some kind of chicken fillet, basil and something else, lemongrass, of course, citruunaroa lemongrass, what I'm talking about. So basil, lemongrass, chicken breasts, still a bit frozen together, but I'm sure we can make this work. This is kind of funny way to cook while backpacking, I have to say. And of course every curry needs its rice, so I have here Trick and Eats. I don't think I've had these before, but this is Trick and Eats chicken in curry rice. So this will be my rice, and then my chicken is the one that is on the pan. 520 milliliters of water. Yeah, that's about right. And then the pan back on. You can perhaps tell that my pan isn't the straightest there is. Has been through a lot, but that's fine. All right, I think our chicken is done. How about our curry rice then? Yep, seems about right. I don't like that smell though, I have to say. Whew, let's see what it says. 0 carbon monoxide, 18 degrees, at least on that level. Not bad, not bad. Yeah, not a bad combination. Not a bad combination. It has never failed when I have made something or taken like a basic backpacking freeze-dried meal and then extended that with kind of the similar ingredients as they're at least supposed to be in the backpacking meal. I do have some bread with me and some reindeer meat spread, which is frozen. Even with just this very limited experience that I have with this kind of a hot tent setup, I have experiences already, quite a few trips with this tent, but I see more sense for me to use this kind of a tent without the inner tent almost all year around, and definitely not for winter use. Now you have to be aware that I am a tarp camper. I've slept many years in all conditions under just a tarp, so being floorless is nothing new to me, and also during winter I have no issues going floorless. And kind of the main purpose of this type of an inner tent would be to give an additional barrier for draft and kind of wind gusts and things like that. That's why there's only a small mesh went up here. And I don't know, with this kind of a hot tent setup, I don't really need this. I have the dog going in and out anyway, so the bathtub floor also collects all that snow from his paws and also from myself. And this definitely limits the space quite a bit. And the only kind of a season where I would need an inner tent would be that midsummer when there's a lot of bugs. But as discussed previously on this channel, this inner tent that the tent came with is useless during that time of the year because it is so hot, because this is a winter inner tent. So in that sense, this whole setup is not really super suitable for me, but I have a lot of plans with this little stove and this tent as well. Doing a bit of combination of tarp and tent camping and using the stove. I think that opens up a lot of new possibilities during, let's say, early spring and late fall, before winter time, or when winter time is over, when it's kind of wet and nasty outside. I think the stove would be quite handy during those trips as well. And definitely just having the cooking surface, that's quite of a nice bonus. I know that it doesn't get picked up on the video, but I have this lantern. Now this is, I believe, Phoenix, is it CL09? Quite cheap, has few white light modes and also red light and green light in case you're interested in those options. But anyway, quite lightweight, rechargeable little lantern. And this is now on its lowest brightness. That plus this little window on the stove. And by the way, if you're getting a stove, I believe that having a window there in the front is absolutely essential. You don't have to open it to see what's the burn like and things like that. And it does provide a bit of light. So that glass plus this little lantern light, I can actually see around this shelter right now. You cannot see it on this video, but I can, and that's quite convenient. When I stop filming or shut down my headlamp, I can still see everywhere in this shelter. That is so cool, because that lowest brightness, that lasts for a long time. So I can have it there all the time and just have this nice little ambient light, plus of course this bad boy, and it's just a really good combination. Also, how do you like Rokka's new name tag? Reflects all light and has pretty nice glow in the dark properties as well. I closed up this side from the bottom, so now there's a bit of an enclosed space for Rokka, so that when we go to bed, or I go to bed, he is already pretty much asleep. Then, you know, he cannot turn around and by accident touch the stove or burn his fluffy fur. But I did put a while back my watch down here, because it also measures temperature, and you can see it's 8.4 around this level. And whereas up here it's 22 at the moment. I got quite a good tip in the comments of my previous video about how to burn this stove as slowly as possible to conserve the firewood. And you can see I have completely closed the air intake now. Still going strong, and that is because there are these slots on the sides, because it is a fast fold model. There you can clearly now see them. On both sides there are these slots, so air is definitely coming in, although the official air intake is completely closed. And on the back, the damper has been roughly 45-degree angle the whole time. And still, occasionally, chimney has gotten red, and I have been able to enjoy this. Seems like it has stopped around 5.8 degrees. You can really feel the cold radiating from the snow. Although apparently there isn't that much of snow here. I believe there was more snow back home. At least it definitely feels like it, because I've been shoveling and pushing it like crazy this week. I have stuff ready, for tomorrow morning should be quite easy to light the fire. Put my bigger gloves up here to dry as well. I have to say I really looked forward to this trip, although it was very simple, not all that much of skiing and dragging the Ahkio, but just the first time hot tenting in winter, that experience. So far definitely worth it. I like it, and I've been actually staring at the stove and the fire, and I think why it feels so good might be that it hits a bit different for us Finns, because that sound of wood burning in the stove is very close to the sound of wood burning in a sauna stove in Kiuas. And of course, every Finn grows up going to sauna. Most of us grow up going to saunas that are not electric but burn wood. So just sitting here still listening to that stove, it's a very, well, warm feeling in more than one way. Let's say it like that. Sounds like it's snowing a bit. Again, I have never been on an overnight trip or a longer trip during winter when it hasn't snowed during the night, regardless of the forecast. It always snows, just a bit. Anyway, see you guys in the morning. Good morning. Slept quite long, as was intended. So we can start to get some daylight soon. But first, let's fire up the stove. Make some coffee. We just stepped outside for a leak, and my temperature meter that I have in the Ahkio said -15. So definitely time to fire this thing up first and then start planning out the day. And full blast, of course. Intake open and damper open. Whew. But a lot of frozen condensation. And I mean a lot. The morning porridge will be a bit different than usual. As usual, I have the 1 deciliter of oatmeal and 1 deciliter of protein powder. And to peepen it up, 511, like energy and protein powder with chocolate and coconut flavor. There we go. Good chocolate, oatmeal, protein, super porridge mix. So I just put in the final bigger piece of firewood and not going to add anything more to it. All vents are open, and I figured it's time to make this guy some breakfast as well. So we start off with high performance kibble, water, we go. And maybe as a treat, there we go. Reindeer soup is ready. I think it's time for my morning coffee as well. Woo. This is what happens when you open up the damper vent from the back. This is also a good thing about titanium stoves, that they cool off quite quickly. That's what I've understood, and with my limited experience that seems to be the case. So that's why the red doesn't go any further up than down there. And also when the wood has been burned, I don't have to wait for a long time to disassemble the stove. Cheers, folks. Still have some chocolate coconut powder here on the edges of the cup, so it makes for an interesting coffee. Everything is pretty much squared away, the inside of the tent, except for the stove that is still going. But I can at least start packing up this pulk or ahkio, and I will bring you guys up here and let's load this thing up, and I will show you what I've done exactly. And if you want to replicate something similar for yourself, it's not a hard thing to do, but there are a couple of things which I'm quite proud of. I might have been the first guy to use this kind of mechanism for a pulk, or maybe not. Like I mentioned yesterday, this is made by Era, of course, Pro Expedition 960 sled. And it comes with these holes pre-drilled, as well as these two up in the front. I hope these are also in the frame. And all I did was loop this, I think this is 8mm thick bungee cord or shock cord. I've seen many instructions on how to build these DIY ahkios, and a lot of them have this configured in a way that they have individual shock cords looped like this, like a short section here, then another cord here, another cord here, so that they all act like as an individual units. But my issue with that setup is that it's then one size fits all, or usually that would be one size fits no one. So what I did instead is I looped one long piece that can be then adjusted according to whatever height of load you have here. In it, just threaded some plastic hooks, which I clipped this kind of securing part of the hook out, so I wouldn't have to try to operate it with thick gloves or anything. So this is all thought to be like very simple to use, and it just goes through pieces of paracord, which is reinforced down here with some pieces of like scrap plastic that I had laying around, like thin plastic pieces, so the paracord doesn't, the knot doesn't slip through these pre-drilled holes. I have these hooks here ready. Super simple stuff. After adjusting everything tight, this U-bolt then guides these shock cords through this cord lock, which then keeps everything in place. I have quite a bit of leftover this bungee cord or rope still. I haven't yet decided where to cut and tie off the ends, so this is like all that's left of the whole construction. The poles themselves, these are just basic 2-meter long plastic tubing, PVC or something, made to hold electrical wires. Hold in the middle, just really quick kind of, again, proof of concept type of thing, so I haven't cleaned this up or anything, but same shock cord that I've used over there. And then the harness system or the belt itself is actually just an Eberle stock waist belt, which, as you can see, I have like tons of this rope here as well as the shock cord, and there's no logic to this mess. Right now I have just threaded things around trying to figure out what would be the optimal place for me to hang these carabiners from. So that's why there's a lot of things going on, as well as this extra loop, because I'm still testing all the time. I'm changing the place where this carabiner is held, as well as if it really needs like additional elastic shock cord here to kind of ease with the pull or not. Right now, as you can see, the shock cord isn't doing anything, but I can rig it up so that it does something. And I'm just testing it out, seeing what would be the best way to do it. And maybe the main thing about this belt is that I'm using not the Eberle stock default buckle, but instead I'm using the best belt buckle in the world, which is Berg buckle. This is what Berghaus uses in their rucksacks, and I bought this as a kind of a replacement piece, and then I'm been using it in my rucksack, and I need to buy another one so I can have one in the rucksack and one here. But because a lot of this pulling and the force is then directed to the buckle, and the buckle needs to be super strong, and this is the strongest one there is because the construction is so simple. There is no parts that bend or need to, you know, adjust to each other to lock. It's all just solid, thick plastic, and this thing isn't going anywhere. So that's it. If not counting the belt itself, because I already had this, I have two of these. One came with the rucksack and one with the rucksack frame, so one is extra. If not counting the belt, everything else, I'm pretty sure it's less than 100 euros. So for that money, I'm okay with this. It seems to be sliding quite nicely behind me. And of course I have the dog who's maybe too eager to pull, but still, so far I'm pretty happy with this setup. Considering the really fancy ones, like the Fjällpulkan, whatever it is, they cost hundreds and hundreds of euros. I'm sure they are super good, as well as Savottas Ahkios, but it's just too expensive for my use. I'm not doing that much of winter camping where I would need to haul a lot of things behind me. Then I just have this military surplus duffel bag. This is from my uncle, I believe. His old military surplus duffel bag. This is where all my gear was. And like I said earlier, IKEA bag in the front for the firewood, and then my rucksack cover on top of this. Super simple setup, but seems to be working quite nicely. Now, I did notice in the morning that last night when I had the air intake almost completely, well, I had it completely closed a lot of time. It didn't really burn everything through quite cleanly and nicely as it does when it's completely open. This is the final piece that I threw in. So that's it. Maybe you can see that, but there's not a lot of ash at all. This is again from the same big piece, and this is pretty much everything else. so not a lot. So I have to say this small stove burns the wood quite efficiently, depending of course your damper and intake settings, and the colors are getting better after every use. I have a couple of free winter camping tips for you all. The first one being, if you do purchase a tent that doesn't come with a center pole where you have to buy it separately, do not get the center pole that is kind of the minimum requirement. For example, for this tent, the center pole suggestion is one that's 163 centimeters maximum, because the tent on the inside is 160 centimeters. But if you're going to use it during winter, get a longer one. This one extends up to 197 centimeters, which means that I can have 35 centimeters of snow beneath the tent, and I can still extend it through the snow all the way to the ground if the snow is soft enough to do that, or if I use a stove and eventually the center pole will grab that heat and kind of melt through the snow, so I can extend it and still keep the pitch of the tent nice and tight. You cannot do that with the 163 centimeter pole, but you can if you grab a bigger one to begin with. And the second tip, this is quite obvious, but I figured I would share anyway. If you have overgloves and undergloves, and you have some type of base layer or a shirt or something that has a thumb hole, always wear your inner gloves underneath that shirt or whatever layer you have with a thumb hole. This way, when you take out your outer glove, the inner glove doesn't go out with it, but it stays in your hand because you do have this sleeve to hold it in place. At least for me that's a big deal, because I always use double pair of gloves during winter. So that's a kind of a convenience thing for me to not always worry about fiddling my hands out of the gloves to keep the inner glove in place. Just use something like this and it never goes out of place or out of style. And by the way, in case you're asking, these are also British military surplus over gloves. Have some insulation in them, so it's not just a shell. And I think these are supposed to have some kind of Gore-Tex or something as well. Of course, it's a downside that there's a separate trigger finger, which means that these are not as warm as traditional style over mittens, but not bad anyway. Quite cheap and definitely rugged. And I think that was my cue that we need to get going soon. Vasen. Hyvä. Looks like we are back on yesterday's tracks. We took a bit different road this morning. I guess this is now as good time as I need to grab a drink. Sorry about the shaky cam, I have to film now with my phone because GoPro is absolutely useless in the cold. We actually did a first training run, so to speak, with the dog and Fulk and skis the day before yesterday. And during that I had the pulling harness on the dog, and because I thought that that's the most logical choice. That's what we use when fat biking together. But good thing we did that test run, because turns out that was not the right choice, because when he gets those pulling harnesses on, it's a go time. So go, go, go. He wants to go super fast, and the attachment point is so far back that there's literally no way to control the dog in a slower pace situation like this. And I want this to be slower pace. And of course, the dog is still so young that I cannot allow him to constantly pull me with all his strength. So we use normal kind of like walking or hiking harness instead. This seems to be a bit better, but there's apparently something ahead, according to the dog. But anyway, more manageable. Good looking forest, I must say. Although not too much snow in here. Kohta mennään. Oh. But one thing is for sure, it is super difficult to film while skiing. So that's why I think I'm going to concentrate on staying upright and not down on my face. And I would like to thank you all for joining us on this overnight trip. First time hot tenting, definitely won't be the last, but I'll have to see what the future will bring in terms of that inner tent views and so forth. And I also have a camping chair now. I'm testing that out, so maybe the next trip will be then without the inner tent, but with the chair. A bit more luxury inside the tent, I guess. All right, you'll be watching Taival Outdoors. My name's Joel. That rascal over there is Rocca, of course. I will see you all in the next one.